Welcome to the solution video for the Web Files Upload Challenge. Let's go over to Visual Studio and start in on building our project. So we're going to go to Create New Project and select ASP.NET Core Web Application, which is either here or here. It's in my recent project templates, that's why it's over here. Hit Next, and we're going to name this Web File Upload Site. And we'll call this Web File Upload Challenge. And hit Create. And we'll get the selection of what do you want to set this up as. I'm going to set mine up as a .NET Core, ASP.NET Core 3.1. That's because I have the preview bits installed. However, if you have 3.0 installed, which is the latest release version, it's going to be exactly the same. There's not going to be any differences in how you do things. Now I'm going to select Web Application here. That's going to be the Razor Pages project type. You could do MVC if you want, but I think that's overkill for what we're doing. We're just going to do a really simple web application. I'm going to select Configure for HTTPS. We want to always have that by default, but I'm not going to enable Docker support and no authentication. We'll hit Create. Once we do that, it's going to scaffold out our project for us. So let's close out of this page and go to Pages. In here, we're going to create a couple of new pages. One for the primary challenge, one for the bonus challenge. That way they're separated out. So we'll add Razor Page. And we're going to select a basic Razor Page. And we'll call this first one the Upload and Save page. So upload and save. We'll leave all the defaults the way they were. That's fine. And this is our primary challenge. So once this is scaffolded out, which it takes a little bit the first time just because it's pulling down some resources and restoring some packages. If you notice at the bottom here, the restore is complete. And now it's done that, it will scaffold out that page for us. There we go. So now we have our page. And this is you can think of it as a code behind for it. If you right click, you can also see that it says page model is the word they use for this code behind file. We have an on get and we're going to need an on post. But let's first start with a constructor. And the reason I want a constructor is because I want to have the web hosting environment. So I'm going to say CTOR for constructor. And I'm going to need to grab the iWeb host environment. Control dot to add that using statement using Microsoft ASP.NET Core .hosting. And we'll call this the host environment, and control dot to create initialize a field, which creates our private read-only field for that. So that now will allow us to capture where we are in relation to the file system. So we're going to use that in just a bit. Now I also want to have a place to store our uploaded file. So let's create a property we'll call iFormFile. And this is what we use to upload files to our Razor Pages. So iFormFile, and we're going to name this, let's just call it uploaded file. And we'll make sure this is a bind property. And a bind property says that you can post, when you post a form, you can write to this property. And so we're going to post to this property. Now, if I wanted to also send it across the URL, which you wouldn't do for a file, but for other things, you would just set it in here to say that it allows a GET to write to as well. Okay, so you do that in the parens. Notice supports GET equals true. That's how you would set it up for supporting GET. Again, not for files, but for other things like ints and strings. Okay, so we have our bind property. Now let's work on our on post. So public async task on post. So it's going to be an asynchronous task. It doesn't have to be. It could be a void. So public void unpost, but I believe I have an asynchronous call I'm going to do in here probably. So I'm going to make it asynchronous. By default, everything on the web is asynchronous. So even if it's not marked as async, it will be called asynchronously. The difference is that when you mark it as async, then you can await things. So if uploaded file, let's make sure it's not null, dot length is greater than 0. This is going to check to make sure that, in fact, there's a file here. Okay. Now we're not doing a lot of error checking here. We're not going to go into, well, what happens if we don't have a file? We're not going to throw an exception or return anything else. And in fact, this on post really should return, let's make it do it, an iAction result. Whoops, not a paren, it's a angle bracket. So we're going to do an else here and return page. So if the file is not valid, we're going to return the page, which means it's going to stop right there and go back and keep the state as it was. But if it's successful, then what we'll do is we'll redirect or something like that. So we can just do a redirect. Return redirect to action and say that our action is index. That's fine. So there we go. So now we have some actions happening. One for if it's successful and one for if it's not. All right. So and just saying there's not an await here, or there's not an await anywhere in here. So why do you have this marked as task? So now we have our scaffolding set up where we have the basics for what happens if you successfully upload a file versus not. But now that we've done it this far, we need to actually do something with our file. So let's first grab, we want to upload this file to an uploads folder, which does not exist. And that's a good thing. We actually want to make sure that if it doesn't exist, it gets created. That way we're always safe when we deploy this. So let's start off with uploads folder equals path control dot here for system.io, path dot combine, and we want the host environment dot web root path. Okay, so that's going to put us in the www root folder. So web root path. We're going to combine that with uploads. This is how you say, hey, I've got this path, but I want to go one level deeper. Instead of doing a string parse, we say, okay, it's slash and then uploads. You do a path.combine. And the reason for that is because if you're on Windows, the slash goes one direction. When you're on Linux, it goes the other direction. Okay? So this way, it takes care of it for us. So instead of doing a parse, let's just do a comment here. So instead of saying, C colon temp might be your path, and then you'd say plus, and then you'd say slash uploads. That would work on Windows. But on Linux, it might be something more like, and I'm not a big Linux guy, but it's something like this. And then you'd say plus other direction like so. Okay, so that's the difference, is the directionality of that slash. So this path.combine takes care of that for you. And since this is a .NET Core website, it can deploy to both environments. That's why it's so important that you do it this way and don't try and parse it yourself like so. Okay, so that's why you do path.combine. But here's the thing. Uploads does not exist right now. So you have a path that doesn't exist. So what we're going to do is say directory.create directory, uploads folder. You may say, well, that only should happen once. Yes, but if you look at create directory, it says creates all directories and subdirectories in a specified path unless they already exist. So it's perfectly safe to run this every single time because it will only create these if they don't exist. Okay, so it's essentially the same as saying, if this path doesn't exist, then do this. Well, that takes care of it for you. Now, the next thing we need to do is we're going to rename the file. And so we need to know the extension of the file because we can allow uploads for any type of file. So we need to know what is that file extension, just the extension, so we can add our GUID to it. So let's start off with just a file name extension. So string file name extension equals uploaded file. So that's what is in this property right here. That gives us our file name, okay? But we don't want the whole file name, we just want the extension. So let's do a substring on this and say, let's get the index of that decimal or that dot. So upload file dot file name dot index of, let's actually put this on the next line. So index of, and give me just that that decimal point or a dot. And let's add 1 to this. Okay? And the reason why is because we want the index of this decimal point. We want it to be 1 further than that. We don't want to capture the dot as well. So we're going to do +1. We could not do the +1 and then just know we have the dot as well. But I think it's a little cleaner to have just the extension. That way we could store it in a file or a log statement somewhere and say, hey, we captured a JPEG extension, JPEG or JPG or PNG or something like that. It's not .png, .jpg, .bmp, okay? So I like to not capture the decimal in there, all right? So now we have just the extension of our uploaded file, or our file we're uploading. So now we can get a new file name. So string new file name equals, and let's do our string interpolation, and we'll start off with our GUID dot new GUID dot toString. So that's going to give us a new GUID, which is random. It's going to be something that's going to be different every single time, which is really, really helpful for naming files when you upload them. Okay, because if GUIDs pretty much can't collide in name, then this is going to allow you to name things pretty easily. Now, there is a infinitesimally small possibility that your GUID will collide with another GUID. It's practically impossible, but it may happen. And so you should still have a file check in here somewhere that says, hey, does this file already exist? And if it does, then redo the GUID. Redo the file name again, and that should be a new one, and then check it again, make sure it doesn't collide. Okay? Again, that shouldn't happen, but it's like winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning multiple times. But in case it does, that file check will save you. Okay, so don't just overwrite files. Okay, so now we have the GUID. Then you want a decimal or a dot. Keep calling it decimal, but it's not a decimal. It's a dot because it's for file names, not for numbers. So we have our dot, and then we're going to have right after that the file name extension. So again, if you didn't do this +1 here, then you wouldn't need this dot. Just don't put a space here. Okay, because remember that everything outside the curly braces is considered exacting text. As in, if you put a space there, there'll be a space in the final value. So you don't want spaces. The only spaces that are okay are inside the curly braces for easier reading, which I like. Some people do not prefer them. That's okay. Okay, so now we have a file name. Now let's get the new file path. This is a lot of setup. String file path equals path.combine. Sound familiar? It should. Uploads folder and new file name. So what this does is it makes a full file path that includes the file name, again, with the correct orientation of that slash. So now we have the new file name and where it should be stored. Now we can actually do our storing. So using var file stream equals new file stream, file path, and file mode dot create. Okay, so what it's going to do is it's going to create a new file for us. And they're going to say await uploaded file dot copy to async, and we're going to upload our file stream. All right, so we create this new stream and we're going to upload our file to that stream. So what we're going to do is this creates a file and it opens it up, and then we're streaming the contents from this into that file stream. The end result should be a file that has been created in that uploads folder. All right, so let's do this. Let's go to our shared and go to our layout, and we're going to create a new entry in the navigation for this page. So this is the upload and save. And let's call it upload and save. Like so. And let's start this using Kestrel. Doesn't really matter. Either one is fine. I just figured to do it this way. And it started off screen, so let's bring it over here. Upload and save. There's nothing on the page. Awesome. Forgot to put the front side of that. So we have all the cool code, but nothing to actually do anything here. So let's start modifying this. So we're not going to make anything pretty. We're just going to put a form here. So form, the method equals post. Make sure you put that. This is the important part when you're doing file uploads, and that is the encoding type is going to be multi-part form data. That's going to allow us to upload that file. If you forget this part, your file's going to be null every time. Okay, so that's a pretty important line to add so you don't get frustrated by why is this not working. All right, so let's create a div with a class equals form group, and then inside here we'll have a label for equals a new file. And we're just going to say upload file. Sounds good. And then input the type equals file. So it's a file type. And let's do class equals form control file. And the ID equals new file. And let's do a placeholder. So a placeholder equals select a file for uploading. It might be too small to actually show all that, but we'll see. And this is going to be, let's actually put this on a new line so it's easier to read. ASP-4, and it's uploaded file. And then after that, we can close out our div, which we did. And then let's put a button afterwards. The button is type is submit. And the class equals btn dash, let's go primary. And say submit. Okay, that's a really complicated little form right there, right? It's just a label, an input, which is file, and then a button that says submit. So the submit button, since it is of type submit, it's going to submit this form that it's in. it's going to do so by means of post, which means that it will run the onPost method of our page model. And this encoding type will ensure that we can actually upload the file we selected. All right, so let's hit save here. And just want to show you real quick, let's open the www root folder and just show there's only 3 folders here, CSS, JavaScript, and lib. So now we run this, in theory, we'll have an extra folder and we will have a file in that folder. So let's actually do this. I'm gonna shrink this down a bit. I'm gonna move my folder in here so you can see it. Okay, we go to upload and save. There's our nifty little form. Upload a file. Let's choose the file, and it says no file. Okay, so the placeholder didn't even show up, so no big deal. Let's make a choice here. Let's go with test data, which we'll use later for the other upload, but this will work for now as well for this one. So we hit submit, and it goes back to the same page, which is interesting because I believe I said go to index. I said action, not page. That's my bad. But notice here uploads, and now there's a file with a GUID file name. But if we open that up, that's our file. So it has captured it in the uploads folder, and it gave it the GUID file name, but it retained the .txt at the end, so it's the correct file type. So the big thing we need to change here, let's get rid of the placeholder because that's not actually being used. And then over here, instead of redirect to action, this is redirect to page. Let's try it again. The cool thing is, even though we have, also notice over here, just real quick, sorry, uploads is now here, and there's one file in it. But even though we've uploaded that file once already, we can select the same exact file and upload it again. Now it goes to the correct index page again. And if we look over here, there's now 2 files, but both of those files are exactly the same in content. But because we use a GUID, we can upload the same file more than once. That can be really useful when you have one central storage for everybody's files, but yet you don't want to allow people to overwrite somebody else's file. So let's just say we have profilepic.png. Well, you might have 5 people that have named their profile pic image as profilepic.png. You wouldn't want mine to be overwritten by somebody else's, and you wouldn't want my file to overwrite somebody else's. So therefore, if you rename it as a GUID, then it will be unique to each person, even though originally the name was the same. And then you can just, and that's also harder for someone if they were to try and guess file names. If you allowed read access to that folder, it'd be harder to find out which file is which. Whereas in your database, you'd know which file is for who, and so on. Now, you probably want to lock it down even further than that and not allow them to browse for files, but that would just be one more level of obfuscation. Okay? So, really nice little feature there. Now that completes the primary challenge. So let's move on to the bonus challenge. So let's start with saying create a new page, and it's going to razor page. It's going to basic razor page, no entity framework, and we'll call this upload and parse because we're not actually going to do any storage of this file. We're just going to parse it in memory. So once this gets created, what we'll do is we'll actually go right away into the layout and add this page. So I'm going to copy this one and paste it, upload and parse. And upload and parse. Okay, so now that page is already added. The other thing I'm going to do is this upload and parse page. I'm going to copy and paste the form. There's no reason to have a different form. It's still just uploading the file. Do the exact same way, exact same name. So let's create a using statement. We're going to do things a little bit differently. We're going to use the using statement from C# 8. This is a new feature that allows us to create using statements without the curly braces. What that allows us to do is not have to worry about nesting our using statements. So using var stream equals uploaded file dot open read stream. Okay? Now, the way this using statement works is that once this is no longer needed, the stream variable, once it goes out of scope, then it will destroy this properly with the dispose method. So adding this using in front will dispose it properly. But this allows me to then say using var reader equals new stream reader, control dot to add system.io, and then we pass in stream. Okay, so now we have created a stream reader based upon the stream. And yes, this sounds a little confusing, but open read stream just creates a stream, but that's not what we can use with our parsing mechanism. Now, we also did not do any verifications on this file. I said you didn't need to, okay? But you could do a check on first the extension to make sure it's a valid extension, CSV or TXT. You can also check for the content type to make sure that it's text, okay? Those are the two things you could check for to make sure this file is valid beyond just it has a length greater than 0 and it's not null, okay? So those are things you could do. I'm not going to here, but you could. You should in a production environment. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to let's capture a list. We've got to first create a model. So let's right click on our project and say folder models, and inside here we're going to create a person model. Now we're not actually storing this somewhere. Person model. Normally you'd want to store this in a database because remember, Razor pages by default are stateless, meaning it will not remember this between calls. But we're just going to capture, we're going to put a breakpoint afterwards and see that in fact it has captured these, and that's all we're going to do. Okay? So string first name, string last name, string email address. Okay? And the reason we're not actually doing anything with this is the point of this exercise is just to prove that we can read from a text file or CSV file without saving it somewhere. We can read it and process it. Now, once we have it in a list of model, we know how to deal with that. We're just testing to make sure we can get it into a list of model. The next step would be to put it from a list of model into a database. And people often get confused and say, well, your job isn't done yet. And it's not if you're building a full application, but it is if you're doing a test. Because the next step would be to send that list of model down to our business class or our business logic, and then from business logic into the data access where you actually store that into a database of some type. So all this work that we're doing is just UI work. And in fact, it's a little more UI work than we might do normally, but it's enough to know that, yes, we can process this and then do something with that processed file. Okay, so it's just a verification we know what we're doing. Okay, that's what this test is. If you make your test too big and do too many things with them, then you don't often get a chance to do testing because you're doing such a big test, it takes too long. Okay, so that's my 2 cents there is make small tests about one little thing and then put those together later into a larger application. But for now, we're just testing this one piece. Okay, off the soapbox, back on to what we're doing here. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to create up here actually I don't even create up at this level because we're not actually going to load it in any way. So let's just create it at this level right here. A list of person model, control dot to add the using statement, people equals new list of person model. And I'm also going to create string data with nothing in it. And the reason why is because I'm going to then have a while statement. While data equals reader dot read line is not equal to null. So this is going to read one line of our stream into this file, or this variable. And then we're going to check this variable to see if it's not null. And if it is, we're going to run this code. If it is null, we're going to exit out of the while loop. So we're done. So we're going to say people.add new person model. And we're going to build a person model. Now, again, this is where you do some checking to make sure that you have your columns correct. But I'm going to make some assumptions here. But I'm just testing to make sure I can do it, not that I have a fully tested and crash-proof application. So I'm going to say first name equals data, and this is going to be data at position 0. Oops, not data. Let's call it entries at position 0. And you say there is no entries. That's right, but they haven't done that yet. So string array entries equals data.split on a comma. We're assuming this is a comma separated text file. That will split it into a string array. So position 0 is first name. All right, and then last name is position 1. And then email address equals position 2. Okay? Again, I'm making some assumptions. You'd have to verify this in a real application. But if we're just testing, can we do this? This is perfect. All right, so it's going to add a new person to the people list for every line that it finds in our file. Let's put a breakpoint right here before we return the redirect. And we're going to inspect this people list. Okay, so let's start this up. And once it starts up, we already have the link in our menu. So we've already taken care of that. And we copied over the upload. So upload and parse looks the same thing. We're going to choose a file. Make sure you choose the testdata.txt because that's the one that has the file in the correct order. Hit submit. And it should be we hit the breakpoint. And in fact, we did. It just didn't pop over to it. So let's look at our locals for people. So you have 3 people. That's good. So the last person is Robert Smith, robbie@smithy.org. And we have the second person is Sue Storm, sue@stormy.net. And the first person is Tim Corey, tim@imtimcorey.com. So it has read all 3 of those entries from our text file into our list. At that point, we would have saved that into a database or done something else with it. But now we're just going to redirect to the welcome page again. Okay? And that completes the bonus challenge for this weekly challenge. Okay? So the primary challenge was to upload and save the file. And we did that, upload and save, and he actually changed the file name. And then the bonus challenge was to upload the file, but don't save it. Just read it and parse it. And that's what we did with that file. Okay? So hopefully that pushed you and stretched you a little bit in a few different areas. Hopefully that you understood what was going on and maybe you learned something new. I hope. Okay? Either way, you got some practice and that's excellent. All right. Thanks for watching. And as always, I am Tim Corey.